Well, hello, Browns fans. Welcome to the Gang of Three, which once again this week will be just a gang of two. As Lane Atkins will return next week. He is having technical difficulty, shall we say. Too bad he doesn't have a good friend who is a web dork or engineer type to help him with that sort of stuff. But we'll get him up and running again here next week. With me is the inimitable Pete Smith. How you doing, Pete?
I'm all right. How are you?
Well, I'm okay. I'm okay. We actually had some good news today, so let's roll with that. By the way, if you are watching in the YouTube or Twitch chat rooms, please feel free to hit us up with any questions or comments that you might have. We've got some stuff here that we can talk about, but we'd much rather talk about what you want us to discuss. And we will hit up your questions and comments, and starting with a real good question from TU Mid-Distance here in just a few minutes. But the good news today, I guess, as good a news as we could expect, is that Quinshon Judkins has avoided knee damage. He has a dislocated ankle and a fractured fibula, which is enough for one person. But fortunately, he doesn't have any additional knee damage. This from Kevin Stefanski. He said, like we talked about last night, knowing the kid, he'll bounce back better than ever. So disappointed for him, but he's in good hands and will bounce back. That's about as positive as I've ever heard Kevin Stefanski after a serious injury to one of his players. Usually he's kind of non-committal about, working the process, and he'll rehab. I know he'll put in, tons of effort and all that sort of stuff. So relatively good news from my perspective. What do you think, Pete?
Yeah, avoiding ligament damage is good. Certainly the structural element, bones heal and they'll do surgery and put the ankle back where it's supposed to be. Obviously, listen, whether I've seen players do it in the NFL. I've had a high school kid that did something very similar to this. You'd be amazed at how good they've gotten at this type of thing. But anything with surgery, obviously there's a concern about their ability to come back fully healthy. But I sort of err on the side of Kevin Stefanski here. I do think it's pretty good news. And more than that, I think Quinshon Judkins more than proved he's a very good player. And God, if the Browns can get him some blocking, he will be a much better player next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that he will. Chris asked if there's any ligament damage to his ankle. We had not heard anything of that sort to date. But, a fractured fibula takes 3, 4, maybe 5 months to come back from, and you're sure Judkins will get the best care. He's a world-class athlete, so maybe he can do a little bit better than normal. But a dislocated ankle, I read, Pete, also takes a similarly long amount of time. It's not something they can just pop right back in. It's, 3, 4 months for him to come back just from that, if he was just suffering from that.
Right. I mean, you could theoretically dislocate an ankle and have it be in a position where it could pop right back in. Clearly, that didn't happen. So clearly, it was bad enough that they're going to have to do it surgically. So yes, it will take time. It will take. It will be very similar to the situation that Cam Skattebo just went through, and I don't think the Giants are worried about him at this point. So. Kevin Stefanski was careful not to put a timeline or anything on it because obviously they want to wait for the surgery to get done before they can start, feeling good about it. And, hopefully, when they get in there and do the surgery, they're not going to go, oh, we also found, X. So
right.
I think that's the other reason they're being a little bit cautious. But so far, it certainly could be worse. And the fact that they're able to get in there surgically sooner than later is also good, that they're not having to wait for something to swelling go down or anything else like that.
Yeah, it's a good thing. Very good thing. So good news from Berea today, which is not something that we typically get. There is going to be news from Berea tomorrow, in that the after practice on Tuesday, the window for participation for Deshaun Watson is over. They have to put him back on the PUP list, or they have to activate him. I have my guess as to what's going to happen. What's your guess as to what's going to happen, Pete?
No, because it was never going to happen. It was amazing to me that a couple weeks ago he was barely healthy enough to get on a plane, and yet, like that was an accomplishment for him to be able to go on the road with the team for a game.
Yeah.
No, he's not ready to play football. He's not going to be ready to play football. And if you paid attention to the OBR, we've been saying this all year, and yet we've had to deal with this whole, asking the coach every week, who seems really enthusiastic about answering that question too, about Deshaun Watson coming back this year. No, him getting to get on the field and do some individual work, great. That can be part of his rehab process, but they're not going to try to put him out there or anything else. So he can revert back to IR, and then they can deal with it next year. And, that part is a mystery, even though I still doubt he's ever going to see the field, but it's at least more viable at that point.
Right. Well, let me quote from one report that was published today on the internets. Quote, but Watson, a 3-time Pro Bowler, looked excellent in his 3 weeks of practice, with some saying he was the most talented quarterback on the field. And he didn't look like he was coming off of surgeries in November 24, in January to repair and re-repair the Achilles. So I would ask people to exercise judgment when hearing this sort of thing, because
I bet I know where that came from. I bet I know it's an agent.
It could be an agent. It could be, mostly these things are quoted as coming from league sources these days. So who knows what a league source is, right? It could be Tony Romo. I have no idea who the league source is, but there would be some people who you would expect to hear something like that from, but we don't know who said it. And, all due respect to the reporter who put that together.
He looked great on air coming back from the shoulder surgery last year too. And then we found out he could not play to save his life. So
right.
I have zero faith that he's ever going to be anything football related again, or that he will ever play.
Well, I certainly was an advocate of never seeing him again. But he is going to be on the roster in 2026 by all estimates, mostly coming from cap experts like our Jack Duffin, who believe that there's no way that they can get out of it in a way that doesn't irretrievably harm them with the cap before 2026. So he's going to be around. So that's going to be a factor as the Browns look at their quarterback room during this off season. But we got some good questions. I want to get to these questions right away. First question comes from TU Mid Distance. And he said, why did the running game look better when Quinshon left? Side note, I'm glad there's no ligament damage to his knee, like we all are. But admittedly, you look at the box score, at least, Pete, and Rocket Sanders and Travion Williams and Shedeur Sanders all had higher averages than Quinshon. Do you think defenses just pay a whole heck of a lot of attention to Quinshon Judkins and maybe loosen up a bit when he's out of the lineup?
Well, there's unquestionable that teams were coming into games against the Browns and saying, we're not going to let Quinshon Judkins beat us.
Right.
And you saw how many guys were in the box, and you saw the different ways they made sure that Quinshon Judkins wasn't going to stop them, be the reason they lost. Him going out of the game, it sort of becomes a little bit of a, okay, now what, in terms of we don't really know where they're going to go. Now, some of that is also a product of what they were doing schematically, because they were incorporating a bunch of different elements. Malachi Corley getting, jet sweeps. They ran 2 reverses in the game. One was very successful. The other was stopped. They used a lot of misdirection concepts to try to create some space. And then I'll give credit to Raheem Sanders, who I liked coming out of college and was guys I talked about leading up to the draft last year and was thrilled when the Browns got him as a waiver pickup. That's what he is. he will take the ball and run through as many people as possible. And he is a battering ram. He's a type of player I think the Browns could use. I'm hoping that he can make the most of these 2 more games of opportunities and maybe show enough that they like him to be in that running back room next year. If they don't want to bring somebody else in to sort of supplement Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson. Trevion Williams had 17 yards rushing. 11 of those on 1 carry, really well blocked play. But, obviously some of that rushing was Shedeur Sanders just scrambling and scrambling well. I thought he did some good stuff, had the one Houdini moment. But it was really just scheme, and I think they got better run blocking sort of as the game went on. So, was it better without Judkins? I don't necessarily look at that way, because the other part of that about that is you can sit there and look at the rushing attack, but Quinshon Judkins in the passing game supplemented that and had a 5.8 yard average as a receiver. And for that type of player, you're just looking at in terms of touches. So overall, you ended up with 13 touches for 59 yards.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. It's not great, but
Right.
that's 4 yards a touch. You'd like it to be a little higher than that with the receiving element, but like it's the overall package that you're getting with him.
Right. Well, Sanders obviously looks to be a little bit more of a runner than advertised when he came out of college. Maybe that's just a matter of it being the only thing available to him as a quarterback more frequently than it was at Colorado, where he had Travis Hunter. But he is scrambling a bit more than we expected, right, Pete?
He's twitchy. Like, he's quick. And as a quarterback, being twitchy is really valuable. When in the not too distant past, you looked at 3-cone and short shuttle. Short shuttle is like a really good measurement for quarterbacks, and there were like little guidelines you wanted to look at because that measured your ankle flexibility, and it was sort of a way to help you sort of get a sense of how good their feet were in the pocket and their ability to change direction. Way more sort of informative than the 40. Shedeur Sanders in a straight line is slow. Like, for people old enough to remember, Tim Couch was a 5-flat quarterback, but looked pretty fast when he got ahead of steam, and guys weren't paying attention to him, which is what Shedeur Sanders said. Being twitchy, he's really good at that stuff. And, especially when DBs are in man coverage, he looks fine. He's able to pick up some yardage. But, it's somewhat similar to Baker Mayfield in the same way, where, it's great when he can pick up some yardage. The fact that he had 49 yards is impressive. For quarterbacks like this, if they can get you a first down every game, that's really valuable. In his case, he got him a couple, and it extends drive. So I think more than anything, I was happy with his judgment on when to run, because he did a really good job of understanding. Like, you could see defenders looking the other way at receivers, thinking nothing of Sanders, and him just running behind them and picking up yardage. So I liked his awareness in that situation and just recognizing when he had opportunities to run. There's one time he ran where if he was a little bit more patient, he probably hits Jerry Jeudy on what could have been a big play, but that was his longest scramble as well. So, he's still learning, but I thought that part of his game was really valuable.
Yeah. It certainly helped out the Browns more than one would have predicted heading into that contest. And, he looked pretty good. The other guy who was pretty happy with Shedeur Sanders' decisions was Kevin Stefanski, who talked about them today and praised Sanders for his decision-making this week as Sanders took more of what the opponent gave him rather than necessarily looking to throw it 40 yards every time. At the same time, there's a little bit of criticism, a little bit in our chat room here, about about Sanders checking down a lot, which is basically, I think, what we were asking him to do the week before against the Bears, where there were some opportunities there that he just seemed to forsake for, the opportunity to throw the ball further.
Well, it seemed like the Buffalo Bills were intent on taking away some of the deep passing opportunities. He had connected a couple times with like Isaiah Bond down the field. I think there were a couple more opportunities they could have connected down the field that didn't happen. Those are big plays that could potentially be instant points. And the Bills basically said, we're not allowing this. Now they disguised some coverages and did some of the stuff the Bears had success with. And I do think it's a credit to Shedeur Sanders. He didn't fall in the traps. Were there some plays he missed? Yeah, I just mentioned one of them on that dagger concept he didn't hit. But by and large, because the Browns were able to stay in front of the sticks, those checkdowns, those underneath throws were really useful because they kept the drive going. And ultimately, his job, first and foremost, take the profit and keep the drive alive. And at one point in the game, I think the Browns were 8 of 10 on third down. And that includes him having to go out of the game when he got his pinky stepped on. That was one of the third downs they didn't get. So up until that point, he's basically 8 of 9. They ended up 8 of 14 because it got away from them in the end. But like, if not for the interceptions, if we just said Shedeur Sanders was 20 of 29 and the Browns had an economical offense and ultimately won the football game, that's how he would describe his performance. Economical, taking what the defense gave him and ultimately allowing him to win the football game. Is that a superstar performance? No, but the Browns don't need him to be a superstar at this point. They just need him to be a smart, effective quarterback and continue growing. And this is part of the growing process, is making those right decisions. And if he keeps making good decisions, those bigger players are going to be there, because at some point teams are going to say, listen, we're going to have to take this away. That's part of the problem with those two picks. Is one was stopping a very promising drive. The first one where they were just marching down the field, looked like they were going to do well again. It bounces off the back, Quinshon Judkins' shoulder pad, goes up an interception, kills a promising drive. And then the other one was sort of a lackadaisical effort in my mind. I thought the pass was late, but just, he sort of looked resigned to the check down there. And I don't know why he sort of took the approach he did, but it was like he didn't realize that the defender could do what he did. Regardless, if he has a clean sheet and the offense moves, everybody's happy with it, and it's going to force the defense to adjust. And then hopefully then those bigger shots open up. So I'm fine with the approach. I think this is part of the growth process for him. So you're going to have some give and take. I want to see big plays just like everybody else, but through the lens of being smart with the offense. One of the things we hated with Dillon Gabriel is because he never took swings, but the offense didn't move either. As long as the offense moves, nobody's going to care.
Right. One of the things that, we got asked about it in Ask the Insiders today, Chris brings it up here, was that injury to his pinky when his foot got stepped on. There's some folks out there who are saying that, after that injury, it seemed like he was not as aggressive down the field. He was checking down a little bit, and that the finger might have hurt him. It was a finger on his throwing hand, so I guess that makes some sense. Did you see anything like that, Pete?
No. And the reason is because if I hand you a football and I tell you to throw it, your pinky's not doing anything. It's just there. It might rest on the ball, but it's not like if it's his index finger, that'd be huge, because that's the last thing that's on, if thrown properly. That the last thing on the ball is the index finger driving the football. The pinky finger is just sitting there. So theoretically, there's a world where he could be worried about it just from the standpoint of it hurts, and I don't want it to sort of get essentially ripped off or something like that. But I saw nothing that suggested that Shedeur Sanders was playing different because of the pinky. And he sort of mentioned this in the post game where he's like, if I thought I couldn't throw, I wouldn't have played. I didn't see anything like that. I just, they got the bandage on there. It was taken care of, but like, you're literally not doing anything with your pinky other than it might rest on the ball depending on how you grip it. It's not going to affect how you throw. It's not going to affect your accuracy. Certainly not going to affect your throwing strength. So it's just something that happened. It looked gnarly when it happened. And even when he got hurt, it wasn't it didn't look like he was panicking because of pain. It was just, I got to get this taken care of so I can go back in and play.
Right. So let's go back to some of the questions that we have here. Some of them are related to the Bills game. Some of them are not. Let's go to this one from I'm not going to try to pronounce the name here, but the question is, if Stefanski remains as a coach, do you think there will be a staff shakeup? And two examples he provides here are firing Bubba Ventrone and rehiring offensive line guru Bill Callahan. I would almost guarantee it, but what do you think, Pete?
Well, I don't think Bubba Ventrone's going to be here next year. I think that one's the given. I think the assuming everybody else is intact, so to speak. I think he's going to be gone. They're going to replace him. Bill Callahan is, I have no doubt the Browns would say, we're more than happy to have you as a consultant.
All right.
But I don't think Bill Callahan's interested. I think he's ready to retire. And the Browns have an offensive line coach they like. They have an offensive line coach the players like. I'm really happy with Mike Bloomgren and what I've seen from him. He doesn't have the name recognition. He doesn't have the name Bill Callahan. He's not a legend in the business or anything, but I am thoroughly impressed when I watch him do press conferences and stuff because I think he gets it. I think players respect the way he handles himself. I think he seems like a good teacher. And I think in watching the sort of line, yes, they need a whole lot of things to be added to the line, but I think he's gotten some improvement from KT Leviston. I think he's gotten some improvement from Luke Whippler. I think Tevin Jenkins has done pretty good things, even though he's battling a shoulder injury. So like my immediate thought is I want him to get a whole bunch of guys he can coach up. And this is one of the reasons I like to hire in the first place. He coached at Stanford when Stanford was a hard ass running team that just sort of lined up a bunch of, graduate students and just ran people over. So he has experience as a teacher in that realm. He's been a head coach. He was the head coach of Rice University. So give him a whole bunch of college kids, give him a whole bunch of guys and let him coach them up. I think it would be a really smart idea. So the Callahan thing, I don't think it's going to happen. And yes, there could be some other assistants that are sort of the Browns move on from. I don't think it would be I don't think Reese or Jim Schwartz are going anywhere. I think there are a few other assistants that are pretty safe on that front. But I could see some changes in that room as well. And there's some that we just don't know about in terms of the work dynamics, or if, Kevin Stefanski sees an opportunity to get better somewhere. Chad O'Shea is always a popular target for people who, in terms of coaches, they'd like to get fired. Who knows on that front? But there's always some changes. It's a question of where. But if you're asking me, a coach, if you go, well, who are the other coaches you like? Jason Tarver can coach here forever. He's awesome as linebackers coach. I really like Ephraim Banda. I'm more worried that other teams are going to look at him and try to give him a coordinator job. He coaches safeties. I like Jacques Césaire coaching the defensive line. I'm happy with the tight ends coach who's come in. That was the former Giants quarterback coach. I don't remember his name, but he's done a really nice job with Harold Fannin this year. And it seems like Deuce Staley has done a much, I think, improved job this year with the young running backs that he's gotten, as opposed to last year where I didn't see a whole lot from him. And some of that may have been just a product of not really a great field of guys, but I think those guys are doing better this year. So that's part of the whole thing. And I've gotten the weird part of this whole element, and I know you've seen the same thing, Barry, is the amount of people are saying, well, can we please fire Stefanski and just have Jim Schwartz and Tommy Reese run the team? Like, so really what you want is just to keep everybody here and just be better. And I'm here for that idea. But like, if your idea is like, the idea is, well, we're going to keep everybody intact and just replace the head coach, is not living in reality. So like, if you're one of these people is like, man, I don't want to lose any of these assistants, you are in the I want continuity camp. And no, with that, no, I do not want to see Jim Schwartz be the head coach. He's done it. I've seen where it caps out at. He's very hard on guys. There's a certain element that people will like that, but he wears on people. And I think Kevin Stefanski provides really good balance. And then simultaneously, I think Kevin Stefanski is a valuable asset for Tommy Reese because he's been here and he's done it. Tommy Reese is still a young coach, though I really like what I hear from him. And I was happy with the game plan they had yesterday. I want to see those guys get more talent. But like, if you are in that camp, you're really saying, please just do this, but just be better at it, which I think you and I would be all on board with 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. It's Schwartz. I can certainly see the appeal to Schwartz. He's a fiery guy and would be a big change from the more sedate Kevin Stefanski, or publicly sedate Kevin Stefanski. I think he's a little bit different when the cameras aren't on him. But anyhow, one of the other things I wanted to talk about today is an incident that happened not in the Browns game, but in the Lions and Pittsburgh Steelers game, where DK Metcalf apparently took a swing, or appeared to take a swing, at a fan, and there's various stories going around about things that were said beforehand and all that sort of stuff. But DK Metcalf looks like he will not be available to Aaron Rodgers this weekend. How big a deal is that, Pete?
It's huge because we don't know what Denzel Ward's status is.
Mm-hmm.
DK Metcalf had a huge game against the Browns the first time. That was Tyson Campbell's first game of the season. And Tyson Campbell, I thought, played well, but they made a couple of really nice plays, and Aaron Rodgers threw the ball well in that game. And DK Metcalf was a beast. I mean, he is a beast. He's just so big and strong. And the Steelers don't have a deep group of receivers. They have now turned to Aaron Rodgers' old buddies like Marquez Valdez-Scantling and those types. I don't know that Roman Wilson is even cracking the lineup at this point anymore. Their third round pick that they took last year. So they still have Darnell Washington. That's a tough deal to cover. He provides some interesting dynamics, but just the Steelers without DK Metcalf is just a very different element, and it just makes the defensive game plan much different for the Browns. The only other element to that is the Steelers the last couple of games, and particularly against the Lions, who were down both of their top safeties, just could not stop the run. They were awful against the run, and the Steelers ended up running for, I think, 230 on the day. And you compare that with the trend of the Browns' run defense as of late, maybe that will get a little bit healthier this week, but it's trending in the wrong direction. So those two things are not great. So DK Metcalf not being there maybe allows them to dedicate a few more resources to trying to make sure they don't get beat on the ground. But it's a huge loss for them. And you know, the other part of that sort of works out for the Steelers is that the Ravens lost last night against the New England Patriots. Had the Patriots lost and the Ravens won, this suspension would loom much larger because those two are trying to fight it out for the division. The Ravens are technically still alive, but they need a lot of help, and they need to win their other matchup with the Steelers. So that's where the DK Metcalf suspension is sort of like hurts the Steelers, but also they've got enough breathing room that they might be fine anyway.
Yeah, that's to me, speaking as a football expert that I am, just another element of the Steelers' weaseliness. They seem to be the weaseliest team in football. You have to give them credit. They always finish over 500, seemingly, with Tomlin. Always get their way into the playoffs, and even get fortuitous offensive passing interference calls at the end of a game. Unfortunately, their fan base is very likely to invade Cleveland. So if you have a ticket and you're interested in selling it, please do whatever you can to keep it out of the hands of Steeler fans. I used to be a season ticket holder, and just being in that stadium where Steeler fans taking over is one of the most, god-awful experiences that a Browns fan could have to endure, but just my opinion. I want to talk a little bit about defense. One of the questions that we've gotten, and Fumble 13 points to it here, is that Josh Allen was very often, it appears, simply running away from Myles Garrett. He was rolling out to the other side. And one of the things I've heard from a number of fans is, why didn't they move Garrett to the other side where Allen is, to the left side where Allen is less likely to roll out, as he seemed to favor rolling out to the right. What did you think of the Bills' approach to minimizing Myles Garrett and what the Browns defense might have been able to do to negate that a little bit?
Well, even though I do share some of the concerns that are brought up in terms of what happened with that, Josh Allen ended up with 95 net passing yards, and he ran for 17 yards.
Yeah.
So it certainly wasn't the deciding factor, and they had a couple drops that could have been good plays. I think some of the lack of Myles Garrett playing on the left side is Myles Garrett's own taste. Seemingly, he's gotten a whole lot of freedom in terms of being able to play where he wants. I think the injuries on the interior may have had a role in placing Myles Garrett more on the right side, just because I think the Browns were thin enough that they didn't want to get in a situation where potentially, like Aiden Huntington was getting victimized a little bit by the Bills at points. And I think the Browns wanted to avoid a situation where they were potentially putting, two guys on the same side that sort of gave the Bills a very clear out. Having said that, there were times where the Browns had numbers to Josh Allen's side and seemingly were in a great position to contain and just didn't. And just allowed him to get outside. Like if they just took a wider path trying to get up the field, they had him. And ultimately, the one of the times that Myles Garrett was lined up on the left side was the Carson Schwarzenegger sack, because Allen went the other way to get away from Garrett and ended up in a sack. So some of this is Josh Allen is ultimately going to go where Myles Garrett isn't. And this is where I agree. Josh Allen wants to go to his right hand. You should make that as difficult as possible. And by not doing that, you sort of put yourself at a little bit of a disadvantage. But here again, the numbers aren't that bad. Ultimately, that's not what beat them. It was James Cook running between the tackles that sort of beat them. But yeah, that's one of those where you get a little bit frustrated and you just go flip your ends, just put Garrett seemingly against the weaker tackle in that scenario and let him flourish. So I will be very curious. I'm sure Jim Schwartz will be asked about that when he's up for his press conference. And I'm curious to see, one, if he gets that question. I assume he will. And then two, what is his answer? Because I don't know that I have a great one. I can just sort of give you a couple of possible theories of the case in that one. And Jim Schwartz may ultimately just bet and go, well, the game was decided by James Cook running for 117 yards, not for Josh Allen throwing for net 95.
Right. And that's fair. So the next question is about the Browns running game. And I know that we talked about this last week and again this week after the game. Mark Smith says the Collins injury hurt the run D for sure.
Barely.
We've always viewed Collins as more of a pass defender than a run defender.
Everything on him is a pass rusher. The Browns losing him as a body hurt just because you have one less body in there. But he is absolutely a pass rusher first, tries to get in the backfield. And this is sort of what happened to Aiden Huntington a little bit. Aiden Huntington did what largely he's supposed to do, which is attack into the backfield and try to cause as much disruption as possible. And there's two parts to this. One, the Bills' offensive line and their blocking scheme sort of are equipped to sort of take advantage of that a little bit. And then James Cook's really good in terms of his agility. So if you charge up the field as a defensive tackle and you miss the play, suddenly there's a giant hole where you are not.
Right.
And that happened on a few occasions. The other element that played into that was that the first touchdown is the one where that's Mahmoud Diabate's play to make. They had it set up so that Carson Schwarzenegger and Mahmoud Diabate should have vice tackled him, had him on each of his hips. Carson Schwarzenegger's in a great position to take what would be his right hip. Mahmoud Diabate, for whatever reason, could not gear down in a way to take away his left hip. So James Cook just stepped where Diabate basically ran past and suddenly had nothing but daylight in front of him. And unfortunately, the Jim Schwartz scheme plays on these kind of margins. This is also why he is such a loud advocate for personnel and why he's constantly asking for more of it, because his scheme is dependent on having guys who are really good for this exact reason. So when you do get into depth, I like Aiden Huntington. I'm excited about what he can be. But when you're down those guys, suddenly, it gets very dicey very quickly. And with the way they play defense and with some of the risks they're taking, which again, to be consistent, I want them to take risks. If the Browns are going to lose and be 3-14 and play to the draft pick and all this other stuff, do it in a way where you are trying to learn as much about what this defense can do. So we're not talking about, figuring out what the second pitch is next year, assuming all these guys are here. And
Mm.
you come into camp going, hey, listen, we know we have the fastball, and we now have figured out that we can do a couple other things that give defenses problems, some of the zone looks, some of the trap coverages. That's what I want them to do. So being aggressive in that instance and being attacking has its benefits, but that's sort of the risk reward situation, particularly with the opponents they're playing the Buffalo Bills, who have been a good run team, playing the Chicago Bears, who have been an excellent run team. There's a little bit of the combination of the Browns aren't full strength on the defense, and they're playing against some of the best rushing teams in the league right now is not going well. And obviously the Pittsburgh Steelers are on the incline in terms of their running game. And hopefully, like the Browns will get Mike Hall back healthy this week, which I think would help them. That they can sort of get back and play better run defense, because ultimately the game was a tale of two halves for the Browns. Run defense was terrible in the first half. We saw them get gutted, and we've seen them give up plays to some of these other teams, Detroit, the Bears, and some of these other teams. And then they got pretty good in the second half. It certainly wasn't perfect. The Bills had a couple of opportunities where they just dropped passes, but they scored 3 points the whole second half.
Right.
And I'm sure you heard the same thing I did. The entire broadcast, the Bills are a slow starting first half team. The Bills don't do much in the first half, but they're the best team since 2023 in the second half. Well, they had 3 points.
Yeah, I was trying to understand, what the difference was in the first half and the second half. Did they get a little bit less aggressive in the second half, or did the players just step up after getting burned early on? I just didn't really have an understanding of why, Cook could get 67 yards in the first 3 minutes and then have the team shut him down pretty much in the second half, or at least limit him in the second half.
I think it's a combination of factors. I think it's the Browns played better. I think the Browns got a key on what the Bills were doing to attack them. And yeah, I do think they were a little bit less aggressive in terms of just sending so many guys attacking up the field, because I think their thought process initially was, certainly we want to stop James Cook, and we want to do that. But I think they sat there and go, we've got to stop Josh Allen. We don't have Denzel Ward. We have Sam Webb and Miles Harden and Tyson Campbell out there, and we're potentially vulnerable for Josh Allen just going off on us. And we wanted to heat him up a little bit. So I think that had more to do with it. But they closed ranks. They got better. They stopped missing plays. I mean, that was so much of it. The first half was just plays to be made and not making them. And some of that is just James Cook is really, really good. But nevertheless, and this is something that's been sort of a thing with Jim Schwartz. We've seen his defense give up early drives. Even the Tennessee Titans game, they go right down the field, no problem. They have early success, and then the Browns sort of stabilize and really take control of the game. And then, in some of these games, then they also allow some late leakage, which they can't overcome. But in this case, they stabilized. They ultimately were able to get off the field and give the offense multiple chances to get a game-winning drive, and the offense was unable to do it.
Yeah. According to Kevin Stefanski, in these games versus good football teams, you're going to be in a battle, and you've got to come through in the end, and we did not. That's the frustrating part. So try and build a story off of that, Cleveland media.
It's a gift.
Right there. Exactly. We've got a bunch of questions lined up here. Let's buzz through them, but let's first point out that Mark makes a good point that Weasleyist is probably not an actual word. I should have used most Weasley, but I will not apologize for associating the weasel with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I'm just going to write on that. Now to the real questions. Here's one from Robert Krisiak. He said, would Tomlin rest starters if the Ratbirds lose on Saturday? I still think he has something to win for in terms of home field advantage or something along those lines. Wouldn't you think? This doesn't seem like a Tomlin thing to start resting his starters with 2 games left to go.
Well, I don't have it in front of me, but a lot would depend on seeding. What the seeding is at stake. I mean, and 2 games as opposed to 1 is also a different deal. Obviously,
Right.
the Browns at 23 rested starters for the last game of the year because they were beat up, and winning or losing made no difference on their seed. I don't know where the Steelers are in terms of what how their seed would be affected by. I'd be real shocked if he sat guys this week because the Steelers have been playing better, and I don't think he wants to jeopardize that. And the other part about that is I don't think he wants to put. There's a pride element in one particular element, which is the Steelers, as Myles Garrett has explained, have an edict that they are not allowed to give up sacks to Myles Garrett, even though he has many of them against the Steelers. They are given free reign to hold or do anything else necessary to make sure he does not give up a sack. So if they sit guys, that almost guarantees he's going to get the record. And that's the other part. And just to your point, I don't know that Tomlin has that in him necessarily. He may rest guys who are sort of, if they're 50-50, he may err on the side of resting them this week. But I think ultimately he's going to keep playing his guys until there's a meaningful reason not to.
Right.
The first round of the playoffs.
And, the notion of not playing some of these guys for, 2 straight weeks, I've just seen it too often in college football where teams get these very long layoffs and, seem to struggle when they come back. Another question from our friend Gurjit. The question is, Josh McCown is rumored to be a hot coaching candidate. Do you think he would be a good option if Stefanski gets fired? I'm not sure how Josh McCown got to be such a hot coaching candidate. I've not seen much on that. But do you have any opinions on this matter, Pete?
He's the quarterback's coach in Minnesota. He's not even a coordinator. Obviously there was a thought at one point that the Houston Texans were going to give him the head coaching job, and they basically were sort of laughed down off of that because they really, really like Josh McCown, but ultimately didn't go that route. And he seemingly is doing a fine job with the Minnesota Vikings, and obviously got a lot of praise for Sam Darnold. It's probably not going to be the year for him, given that the Minnesota Vikings quarterback situation has been a mess.
Right.
With JJ McCarthy, who left, has been an up and down player this year, left yesterday's game with yet another injury. They're down to Max Brosmer. The Vikings in general are not doing very well. So no, I really like Josh McCown in terms of the person and remembering how he was as a player with the Cleveland Browns. Certainly was a positive locker room influence, but that would be a massive promotion for him that I don't think is coming or realistic at this point.
All right. So we'll move him down the hot list of candidates to replace Stefanski. Chris wants to know if you think they'll bring back Teller and Njoku.
Teller, no. Njoku, I hope so. I don't know what else is really available in inline tight ends, but they're valuable. They are more valuable than you think. And the Mark Andrews contract shows you that, because I think a lot of people sort of raised an eyebrow when they gave him 3 years and basically $10 million a year on a new contract extension. So I'm hoping the Browns get a tight end, or I should say, hope they re-sign Njoku. A dream world for me. One, I'd love him to stay here as long as possible, so long as it's economical. And Njoku has expressed his interest that he has no interest in leaving if he can help it. But if I was to sort of say, what's the most reasonable way for the Browns to plan ahead? Sign Njoku to a 1-year deal and draft somebody to develop behind him, so you at least have a runway. You could certainly continue to re-sign Njoku again if he's able to stay healthier and be a bigger impact player. But I think he has been stuck blocking so much that it sort of mutes his presence because the offensive line has been so bad. But if you let him walk, then it's just one more thing you have to replace. And I don't know that the
Right.
Browns are in a position where they want to do that. If they change the front office, if they change the coaches, I think all bets are off at that point. But if if Barry in particular is sticking around, I think Njoku will stick around. But could be we'll have to wait and see. But it is definitely on my shopping list to get another true inline tight end some point, likely in the draft.
Right. That might be a late day 2, early day 3 sort of
Right.
thing. Question from Kramer's C91 wants to just ask us if the Ravens just go crazy and fire Harbaugh this offseason. He's been there a long time.
Yeah, I don't, and that's ultimately why I don't think they will.
Mm-hmm.
I think they will sort of chalk this up to a bad year in terms of a number of things, mostly health related. And look, the Ravens notoriously are as good as Lamar's health is, and Lamar has not been healthy. Now, the one thing that John Harbaugh has received a ton of criticism on, and continues to receive a ton of criticism on, is the hire of Zach Orr as defensive coordinator. He let Denard Wilson walk out the door on that move. Now, that the play of the Ravens defense has been better, much better in recent weeks. So that probably takes a little bit of the heat off of him, but still, there's a lot of issues on that team that need to be fixed, but I don't think Harbaugh is going to pay the price. And this is another one of those things where, as you know, when Joe and I talk about this, on any given Sunday, basically 28 teams hate their head coach. So right now, one of those 28 teams is the Baltimore Ravens fan base. The only thing that you can say in sort of support of the Ravens is, and I don't think it would be easy to replace John Harbaugh, but the Ravens are a really good job, and they will attract really good candidates. But will they necessarily get some better than John Harbaugh? Difficult. And I think this is the problem that a lot of these teams are sort of running into is, yeah, it's easy to say, okay, we're done. But then you have to try to get somebody who's actually better than the guy you just had. Otherwise, everybody's going to remember, well, John Harbaugh won a Super Bowl. Or if you're a Cleveland Browns fan, I promise you this will happen because I've listened to it with John Dorsey and Bill Belichick and any number of other people who were hated when they were here. It will not be, nobody's going to care that they can find a coach that can win more than 3 games if that's the fate of Kevin Stefanski. They will ultimately compare him against 11 wins and a playoff victory. And that's just how this stuff works. So you have to sort of figure out, is the guy I'm going to be able to hire going to ultimately at some point be better than that? And the answer is no. Then you've got to really think hard about not doing it. Otherwise, you're going to end up being the Tennessee Titans.
And you don't want to be the Tennessee Titans. Trust me, even with Cam Ward maybe playing a little bit better. Ian Coleman's suggestion is to throw a boatload of money at Josh McDaniel from New England and let him cook up the offense, keep Schwartz at DC. Josh McDaniel's return to the New England Patriots wasn't necessarily all that broadly welcomed until Drake May started playing extremely well. At least that's my take on the situation.
Do you want to make a call to the bullpen here? No. Let's look. Here's the thing. Josh McDaniels had the job. He had the Cleveland Browns job and then demanded all kind of outlandish crap.
Right.
And tried to strong arm Jimmy Haslam. He will never be the head coach of this team, nor should he ever. He's one of the worst head coaches in NFL history. He's awful. Genuinely one of the worst. This is the thing where I get so infuriated with people who are like, I hate Kevin Stefanski and I want to replace him. So I'm going to get the worst coach that's ever coached to replace him, who has failed 3 times. He had the Raiders job, the Broncos job, drafted Tim freaking Tebow, failed miserably. He accepted the Colts job and then just backed out. And then he tried to strong on the Browns, then went to the Raiders and completely botched that job too. The Raiders are in way worse shape with him there. So no, Josh McDaniels is a complete non-starter. And this is the other problem. Josh McDaniels is like Joe Biden. He's been around so long that people just sort of get to a point where they talk themselves into this being a viable option again. He sucked. I give him all the credit in the world as an offensive coordinator. He's done a fantastic job with Drake May, who is a tremendous quarterback. He is not a head coach in any way, shape, or form. He gets teams mutinied on him. Like, stop it. This is insane. Throw a boatload of money at him. He should apologize for what he did the first time. And thank God he did, because the Browns ended up with Kevin Stefanski instead of this clown.
All right. So I take that as a no.
Good Lord.
Let's talk a little bit about the failed special teams play of the week, which was the field goal, which turned into a long pass by our punter. Wolf 76 wants to know any word on the special teams collapse other than the kicker. And James Porsche wants to know, did the missed field goal play a part in the Browns' loss, in your opinion? It was 3 points, and that was the difference in the game. So I say definitely on that one. But any thoughts about what, this week's special teams disaster, Pete?
What's absolutely crazy about this is, if not for the botched field goal, the Browns special teams completely outplayed the Bills. The Bills special teams were awful in that game. They had a whole bunch of kicking issues. The Browns crushed them on field position. But unfortunately, and this is one of those things where whether you want to put on the snapper, the hold, or whatever, operation didn't work. Credit to Corey Bohorquez for being smart and throwing the ball out of bounds, as opposed to like trying to do something stupid, potentially like throwing a pick six or fumbling or something idiotic like that. But it's, and far be it for me to defend Bubba Ventrone, but this is one of those things where I don't put it on Bubba Ventrone. Like, this is just a thing that happens, and you're not going to get on him over the long snapper or the holder. But still, unfortunately for Bubba Ventrone, it's just sort of another thing that happens under his watch. But yeah, huge impact. Obviously, the game plays out differently in the second half. Mm-hmm. If the Browns have 3 more points, obviously the Bills aren't just trying to run out the clock at the end, and they're actually trying to score and some of those other things. But yeah, there's no question. And the other part about that is Andre Schmidt's been really good. So you'd like to think he gets a clean hold. They're going to make that kick and go in with some little bit of momentum into the half. Mm-hmm. Everything's different with that. So, for me, the person who wants a higher draft pick, it worked out in my favor. But there's no question that if the game mattered, that's a huge play in the game.
All right. Got time for a couple more questions here. And thanks to everyone for all the great questions tonight. It's been a lot of fun. Just a comment from Kelly Black. I like Ronnie Hickman, but I feel the Browns need a better free safety option. This is something that I think we've talked about before, Pete. Do you agree with Kelly on this one?
So when it comes to Ronnie Hickman, I think he's okay. And when he's the 10th or 11th best player on defense, you can sort of get by on that. Mm. And I'm absolutely re-signing him as a restricted free agent. But my opinion on this thing has been like, I'm not trying to get rid of Ronnie Hickman necessarily, but I'd like to get somebody else in the room that sort of supplements what he does. Mm-hmm. For example, it's third and long. Maybe the Browns have a truer deep safety that's just specialized in being sort of that center fielding rangy type, or is maybe a little bit better in man coverage or whatever, that gives you some sort of options to sort of fill in some of the areas where Ronnie Hickman is not as good. I mean, if the Browns offense was better, I would say go nuts, try to find somebody and draft and get a better player. But given the circumstances, if they can find a free agent that can come in and give them some competition and maybe get a better situation, great. But it's, Ronnie Hickman is certainly low on the list of concerns I have for this team right now. And if the Browns can get a really good offense, and we're having this conversation at in front of the after the 2026 season, there's more legs. Also, he would have another year of experience to sort of figure this thing out. So he's just a little bit of a roller coaster ride. There are times where I really like what he's doing. I like the effort he plays with. I think his give a shit is always full in terms of how hard he's going to play. But there are just times where it's just like, he's just not enough. And there's limitations to what he can offer. So I totally get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for the donation. Doesn't matter. Really appreciate it. people want to pay us for it, we will rant about Josh McDaniels all evening, but we really do appreciate it. Let's go to some of the other questions that we have stored up here before we are going to exit. This is another one from Chris. Pro Football Focus did their mock draft this morning, and it had Miami trading up for Mendoza, the Raiders taking Moore, and the Cleveland Browns in the 3 spot, which I don't think they're ultimately going to be, but in the 3 spot, picking Carnell Tate. In that, I love me the Buckeyes, and I love me some Carnell Tate, but that just seems like an overpay. Do you agree with that, Pete, or you think I'm crazy for turning away Carnell Tate at the third position in the draft?
Well, to answer his specific question, as far as being a number 1, I don't care. Like, he does things that a number 1 receiver does. He demands the attention of a number 1, like a number 1 receiver would. And you go back to let's go to a real easy example. LSU had Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson on the same team. They both came out and were great. Jamar Chase was theoretically the number 1 receiver on that team, but Justin Jefferson has been one of the best receivers in football. You go back a little bit further to the Miami Hurricanes teams when they were really good and really well paid before it was legal. And, and I'll get into this whole thing because the market share data is also there behind some of these teams that had all these options. Like when Miami ran through these guys, like they all got enough yardage to sort of warrant the selection. Carnell Tate, in terms of what you ask for in market share relative to the games he's played, he plays like a number 1 receiver. He plays like a top level receiver. I don't get too caught up in that because so much of this is role and matchups and all those other things. As far as the concept of Carnell Tate being the number 3 pick in the draft, I would just be very curious. You just sort of look at the draft, and Ruben Bain was fantastic in the bowl game.
Yeah,
he's also got very short arms. And you're already seeing talk about, well, is he really even a first-round pick? And, I suspect there's going to be similar conversations when it comes to somebody like Arvell Reese, not in terms of the arm length, but is he really worth this high of a pick because the weird kind of position he plays, and is everybody going to be really into that? And there's no clear offensive tackle that everybody's going to sort of jump on, and there's no clear corner that everybody's going to jump on. And, if you get the 2 quarterbacks, those things are going to be, those guys are probably going to go at the top. But then, you start looking after the premium positions after that, and wide receiver is one of them. So if you think Carnell Tate is the best receiver, then it's very easy to justify. Even if you want to say, well, he's not quite Jamar Chase, and Jamar Chase went 6th, consider the draft he went in, or whatever Jamar Chase went, I think it was 6th. The amount of talent that went around him. Like, ultimately, you got to play the board as it is. And the example I use is if Carnell Tate, as he currently exists, was put into last year's draft, and the Browns were at 5th pick, and they had Mason Graham there, and they take Mason Graham, and I'm thrilled with them taking Mason Graham. But one of the other considerations of that pick was, well, should the Browns take Tetairoa McMillan? If you feel Carnell Tate is better or just as good as Tetairoa McMillan, would you really complain if the Browns took him at, or anyone took him at 5? And most people I ask that question come back with the answer of no. So ultimately, you can say it doesn't feel great to take this guy at 3, but you have to consider what your other options are. And if you can't trade down and you can't do anything else, you've got to make a pick. So if you're forced to make a pick in that situation, and you're sitting there going, okay, I really like Caleb Downs, or, Jeremiah Love's another one I've seen mentioned real high. And if those are your other options, you're going to take Carnell Tate and be like, we believe in him. We love him. We'll pay the small amount of extra money the number 3 pick in the draft gets, but ultimately we want to get our guy. And, and you've probably seen the same thing I did have, which is the people are like, well, the Browns should have taken Emeka Egbuka at 5th pick. Now, Emeka Egbuka started out the year really well, has sort of fallen off as the year has gone by. But if you were okay with Emeka Egbuka at 5, you certainly would be thrilled with Carnell Tate at 3, if that's the scenario.
Yeah, very different type of receivers, but Carnell Tate has done extremely well this year, and I don't think it's just because people are focused on Jeremiah Smith. I mean, he has made some fantastic catches this year that were just legendary. All right, well, I think we are going to wrap it up now. It's been about an hour that we've been on the air. Just one last question for you, Pete. Just out of my own curiosity, and it came up in the chat as well. You saw Ty Simpson in the last half of that Oklahoma game.
Yep, one of us was awake for that.
What's that?
I said one of us was awake for that.
That's surely true, but those of us who went to sleep at halftime because they were convinced it was going to be a rout woke up to find Alabama, firmly in charge. But what do you think of Ty Simpson after that performance? Whereabouts in the first round would you put him? Is what I'm trying to get at.
That's the part that's really difficult to tell because he had like a bad 4-game stretch to sort of finish the year after he had a fantastic 4-game stretch where he beat 4 SEC ranked teams in a row, including Georgia on the road. I think that game changed the narrative on him quite a bit. If he went out and they just went the way the game that, if you went to sleep at halftime, you thought it was going to go, I think it probably put him in the mid-first to Jackson Dart neighborhood of the draft.
Right.
But the fact that he played as well as he did, listen, the thing with him that is a lot, the same qualities, obviously he hasn't played a whole lot, which is part of the problem and why he needs to do well in the playoff. A lot of the qualities he has are very similar if you liked Baker Mayfield. And I did. He is a playmaker. He throws the ball really well. Now, there are times where he's inaccurate because he's got this whip-like throwing motion, which could sort of lead to some inaccuracy. He's not particularly fast or overly athletic, but he picks up some yardage, not unlike Shedeur Sanders. And he makes some great throws. He fights and fights and fights. And there's something about him that you can sort of you can just like the way he plays the game. Mm-hmm. So if he's able to go out, and I think they've got Indiana this week, or the second round of the playoffs, and he shows well there, it will not surprise me if he still ends up going in the top 10. And some of that is going to be a product of demand. Too many teams need quarterbacks. And if there's a clear line of delineation, if teams think he's a viable starter and potential long-term starter, those guys get elevated. And the guys that they think aren't tend to get dropped down, which is what we saw last year, where we saw the basically Tyler Shuck was the last quarterback taken in that sort of first tier area. And then there was a round and a half almost of trench before we saw another quarterback taken. That was ultimately Dylan Gabriel or Jalen Milroe. So I think he's certainly going to be in the viable candidate role. Then it's just a question of how well he plays. And the other part about this is I think people a little bit were overreacting to how poorly he played. It's not to say he didn't play poorly. It's just I think when people go back to the tape, this is sort of the thing. They take the emotion out of it and the sort of the trends, and they just sort of put it all together. And I think he's still going to end up in the first round. But it's really difficult to place him right now just because his season has been so divided in terms of being really good at points. And some of this is timing. Being really good at the end of the season is certainly worth more than being very good at the middle of the season. And he sort of reversed those things, at least right now. Played well this game. If he continues to play well, plays well against Indiana, I think it will help him a ton. I don't think he's going to get ahead of Fernando Mendoza, certainly. I think it's unlikely he's going to surpass Dante Moore, though it's not out of the realm of possibility. So he would clearly be QB3, and it's just a question of where does he find that spot.
Right. All right. Well, it's going to be very interesting. We're going to have plenty of time after these next 2 games to talk about what's going to happen in the draft, to talk about quarterbacks specifically. And as Pete pointed out, this is around my bedtime, so probably need to wrap it up here. I want to thank everybody who was in the chat, everybody who hung out with us here today. It was a fun show. I really enjoyed it. And we hope to see you again. We're planning on doing another show next Monday night here on Gang of Three. And we hope to see you then. Good night, everybody.